Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording from our 2021 Passover Prep Learning Series.
It was our first year of marriage, and in the months before Passover, as it happens in Rabbinical school, we were studying the laws of Passover. So then, as now, my wife starts making Passover the day after Purim. Okay, so I showed her. I said, "Look, I can show you in the Shulchan Aruch. You don't have to do all this stuff, right?" And she said to me, "Get out of here! You're not going to trape up my kitchen." And who was her authority? Her authority was her mother, right? You need to understand that there is the legal tradition, and then there is what people actually do in their kitchen. That is primarily women until very recently did in their kitchen, right? So the men wrote the laws and the women actually did whatever they did, right? And usually, like my wife, usually what the women did was far more stringent than what the men said was required, right? So, what I'm going to say is what is in the law, but you need to know that there are a number of family customs that have come down from generations that, and if you're doing them and you find meaning in them, fine, whatever you like. Okay. Now, the one piece of this though that I do want to warn you about is that because generally during the course of the year, if the typical example is if a drop of meat gets into a meat soup gets into a meat soup by accident, then it is batel b'shishim. It is nullified if it is less than 1/60th of the volume of the meat soup, right? So, but in Passover, chametz is asur b'chol shehu. It's forbidden in any amount, right? So that piece of it has led Jews all over the world to have whatever piece of them that is anal compulsive comes to light, right? And people, they go crazy over this stuff, right? So, let me just say, you don't have to go crazy over this, right? There is, there is a reasonable ground here, right? Where you can be serious about observing the laws of Passover without going crazy. And one last thing, this is, Passover, like all of the other rituals of the Jewish tradition, are part of what makes it so rich, okay? And it is really part of what we all either dread or look forward to, depending upon where you are at this. As a matter of fact, Ron Wilson did a book on Passover and quotes Rabbi Schatz's mother, who says that after Purim, what did she say? I start making lists, and I forgot what the rest of it was, right? But it was just so funny because that's probably what happens in a lot of homes. But the point is that, it requires a lot of preparation and changing things and all of that. And, and all of, what's happening in my house is that all of a sudden I have all of these very the kinds of soups that Marlon's making, and to get rid of what's ever in the pantry, right? That's what happens. But there's less and less of the kitchen that I get to use, starting literally the day after Purim. But let me just say that all of that, just try to remain reasonable about all of this, and definitely, probably the most important thing is don't let this get in the way of personal relationships, right? Don't let it be that you're very stringent, and then you look down your nose at people who are less stringent or something like that, right? That you really should not do. And that includes things like, I was just talking to my rabbinical students this afternoon. I said, if you're going to your parents' home and your parents are not as religious as you are, you really need to come to some kind of accommodation, right? Because honor your father and mother is in the Ten Commandments, and neither Passover nor Kashrut is. right? And so you need to sort of put these things in perspective. And similarly, I mean, it's COVID, so probably people are not going to be visiting each other, in person. But when we go back to normal, if you're going to been invited to somebody else's house and you're reasonably assured that that person knows how to make Pesach, don't ask questions. Okay, just simply accept whatever that person has done. Again, assuming that the person has a reasonable sense of what it means to make Passover. Okay, there are all kinds of differences among, and by the way, these are reflected in the codes of Jewish law. There are all kinds of differences in terms of exactly how you make Passover, and so don't be surprised if those kinds of differences come to the fore when you start talking to your friends or your family members or whatever. All right. Let me start from the beginning, as it were. A very good place to start, according to. All right. Anyway, what is chametz? Chametz is one of the 5 grains that the Torah is talking about, namely wheat, oats, barley, spelt, and rye. One of those 5 grains that is combined with yeast and water and allowed to rise and baked so that it would rise. All right, that's chametz. Now, and so that's the stuff that is really forbidden on Passover. Okay, then there are derivatives of that. In other words, things that are made out of some where that gets changed in some ways chemically, especially, and then it gets used in different ways. So those are the issues in regard to foods, which I understand Rabbi Schatz talked about earlier in this series. So I'm not going to go any further with that, except to say that you really need to distinguish between that which is really forbidden, namely bread and things like it, as opposed to secondarily forbidden in terms of being derivatives of these things, especially in terms of things like alcohol and whiskey and things like that, right? Or sometimes in food flavorings and things like that. You have to be a little bit worried about that. And then there are things that are by custom you don't eat. Kitniot, of course, is the obvious example, and the conservative movement, both in Israel and in the United States, has said that kitniot are permitted on Passover, and I voted for that. But there will be no kitniot in my house on Passover, right? Because Marlon doesn't want them. All right, so it's and that's all fine. I mean, we'll all survive for the now 9 days of Passover this year. Okay, now let me, what I'm supposed to talk about is how you kosher your house. My guess is that most of the people on this call already know how to do that, but in any case, what I've asked Rabbi Schatz to do is to email you or from the Passover guide that the Rabbinical Assembly produces every year, which talks a lot, which gives all the details about how you do this. And let me just say, it's not. It doesn't really have to be all that complicated. And exactly how you do it depends upon your kitchen and depends also upon your, whether you're going to have completely separate set of dishes and pots and pans for Passover, as well as the utensils, or whether you're going to try to kosher some of the things that you use during the course of the year in order to be able to use them for Passover. So some people have a completely different set of dishes and pots and pans and utensils, forks, knives, spoons, that kind of thing. And they sort of they close one set of cabinets and then open another. Or when we first moved here, our Passover things were in the garage, so I was making a lot of trips to the garage and back again, taking out the regular dishes and pots and pans and bringing in the Passover ones. And then we remodeled the kitchen. And we had a non-Jewish contractor, and he didn't understand why we wanted so many cabinets in the kitchen. So I tried to explain it to him a little bit, and he looked at me really, really queer-eyed. I mean, it was, but we have all those cabinets, and that's what happens in our house now. But you need to be able to afford all of that, both in terms of just the money and also the space. And for a lot of people cannot, and that's perfectly fine. So that's the reason why you have ways of koshering those kinds of things. So the basic idea is that you take the biggest pot that you have and you fill it with water and you bring it to a boil, and it will splash over and you get your kitchen messy with water, right? But then again, it gets messier still, because then you put in the next largest pots and the next largest pots and so on, right? And leave them in for a little while, and then finally the forks, the spoons, and the knives, those kinds of things, and you just put them in all metal things like that. You can put in boiling water, and that koshers them, but you also do not use them for 24 hours afterward, right? To make sure that there really is a distinction between your use of them for non-Passover uses and for Passover uses. They're earthenware, you're not able to kosher in that way. So if it really is earthenware, then you're really going to have to get some other kinds of dishes or things like that. But you don't have to, you can get. I mean, I remember when we first moved here back in 1971, we just bought Melmac, it was called at the time. You could, I don't even know if it exists anymore, but it's just, you can get servers for 8 or 10 or something like that or more at a very reasonable price, and they looked sort of fine, and we weren't embarrassed to invite friends over for Passover using those dishes. And aside from that, everybody understands that Passover is different, and whatever happens. Basically toaster ovens you can't kosher. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. The ovens you clean out, and then if you have a self-cleaning oven, then clean it out, then use the self-cleaning feature on it, and then let it cool down, and then clean it out again, and you're done, right? If you don't have a self-cleaning oven, then again, clean it out, and then turn it on to the highest temperature that it goes, and let it go there for an hour or so, and then let it cool down and clean it out again, and you're done. There are some who require like a blowtorch or something like that. I think that's way overboard. This is my position anyway. I think it's just perfectly fine if it goes to the highest temperature it can go, and you leave it there for an hour and empty. Dayenu, to quote a certain thing from Passover. In terms of glassware, well, my mother, Aleha Shalom, was really smart and really in this world. She was valedictorian of her college graduating class. But in our house, when I was growing up, she put all of the dishes and also the silverware in the bathtub and filled the bathtub with water, right? Left it there for 24 hours, drained the bathtub, filled it again, and did it a third time as well, right? I mean, you do not have to do this, all right? With glassware, all you have to do is wash it and let it stand for 24 hours without using it, and then it's kosher for Passover. Okay. And by the way, all kidding aside, the same sort of thing, by the way, with your dishwasher. Let it stand for 24 hours without use, and let it go through a one cycle without any dishes in it, and it's kosher for Passover. Remember, we are living in Southern California, and this year we got very little rain. So you do have to, in any of these procedures where there's some people who had three different cycles that they put their dishwasher through to make it kosher for Passover. First of all, you don't need to do that, but in Southern California, with the drought that we are about to have, I think it's really irresponsible, and it's certainly not necessary. So the So, I mean, I think you have to take into account, where we're living and what the realities are, and as well as what, the law would say. A metal sink can be kosher the same way that you kosher any other kind of metal things, that is, pour boiling water over it. Similarly, many counters. Now, when we first moved here, the counter that we had was not, could not be koshered by simply boiling water over it. So I had to put this sticky kind of cover over it, which is hard enough to put on it and then even harder to take off at the end of Passover. So when we renovated our kitchen, we got Caesarware, I think it's called, because it comes from Caesarea. And it came with a letter saying that, from a rabbi saying that in order to kosher this, all you have to do is pour boiling water over it. So that's what we do with our counters. Now, if you have wood counters, you really can't do that. If you have wood counters, then you really will have to cover them. With, all you need is some kind of a tablecloth, or actually what probably is better, especially in the kitchen, is something that won't absorb liquid, that will be more usable that way. But so if you have wood countertops, you probably will have to cover them in some way. But if it can take boiling water, if the kind of countertop that you have can take boiling water, then that's really all you need to do. And what will probably happen in your house as in ours, there will be some pieces of it that you'll make Passover first, and then whereas during the rest of the time, I'll get rid of it. Oh, that's Michael. Hold on just a moment. Hi, Michael. I'm teaching right now. Can I call you back? Okay. Bye-bye. So the thing is that it's a family's family. So the thing is
I just wanted you to say, Michael, don't you know I'm teaching? I can't. Didn't you read your emails to know that I'm teaching right now? I can't answer the phone right now. I was actually hoping it was Rabbi Kligfeld so that you could say the same thing. But anyway, continue.
I see. All right. So I mean, I think that's the basic idea in terms of how you kosher your kitchen, and so maybe I should just stop here and take whatever questions you have.
Great. Okay. I see Renee's hand up. If anybody else has questions, just put your hand up. I will call on you, and we'll do it that way. Okay, Renee.
So when you mentioned koshering, like if you want to do the glasses, you just have to wash it out. Do you use a sfog that's for Passover or a sfog that's for not Passover?
Okay. So the easiest way to do it actually is you probably wash your glasses in your dishwasher. If you have a dishwasher.
Yeah.
Right. So just wash your glasses in the dishwasher, right? And then take, just again, really for symbolic reasons, not because you're worried about chametz, to be very honest, but for symbolic reasons, take your sponge for Passover and just wash it one more time, just for symbolic reasons, right? But if you put it through the dishwasher, whatever was on, if your dishwasher works, right, whatever was on the glasses will disappear, right, and go down the drain. So, I mean, truthfully, once you have washed them, once you have put your glassware through the dishwasher, it's koshered every single time you do it. As a matter of fact, the year before Milo and I got married, at my first year of graduate school, I was rooming with two other guys, and one of them was a member of the Orthodox synagogue, where Haskell Lookstein was the assistant rabbi. His father was the rabbi; he was the assistant rabbi, my roommate's mother had a set of glass dishes, and so we asked him whether we could use glass dishes for both milchik and fleishik during the year. And he said yes.
Really?
And I have to tell why? Because every time you wash glass dish, you're koshering it.
But only if you do it in the dishwasher, because otherwise, what do you wash it with? Do you wash it with the meat sfog or the dairy sfog?
Well, depending upon what you put on it. So if you had meat on it, you washed it with the meat sponge, and if you had milk, you washed it with the milk sponge, right? And I have to tell you, it was really odd. I mean, even though I tend to be makil on some of these things, right? But it was really odd. And if you have anything like enough money to buy a set of Melmac or something like that, I would really recommend having separate dishes for milk and meat. But the fact of the matter is that the way that Jewish law sees it is that there are really three different categories of material. There is glassware, which is presumed to be completely non-porous. So because it's completely non-porous, every time you wash it, you're effectively koshering it. Okay? Second,
but only if it's in a dishwasher, right?
But even if you know, even just regular washing, assuming you want, especially if you're washing with detergent, right? Because detergent gets into the substance of the material that you're using it on much more thoroughly than soap does. So if you're simply washing it, you're koshering it every time. Metal is the middle one, and for that you need to do it through boiling water. And then earthenware you cannot kosher, right? Except if you don't use it, fine china, if you don't use it for a year, then there are those who would say that it then has been koshered and you can use it for whatever you want to use it for. But by and large, those are the three categories. So then when you get modern things, like, when you get Corningware, or you get Pyrex, or you get whatever you get, some of these modern materials, the halachic question is, from a chemical point of view, is it more like glass, or is it more like metal, or is it more like earthenware? And so one of the things that has happened on the law committee, this is now for decades, is that whenever you get one of these new kinds of materials, we send it to a chemist. And we ask the chemist, if you had to analogize it to one of these things, basically we're asking, what is the degree of porosity? How porous is it? What is the degree of porosity? And is it more like glass? Is it more like metal? Or is it more like earthenware? So that's how we came to that is the law committee decades ago, came to decide that Pyrex is like glass. And so it can be koshered simply by washing out, right? But which again, Marlon doesn't like at all. Okay.
That's my Mora.
Okay, what can I say? But that's what the chemist told us. All right. So, but it's, and see, basically the point being, here I think Marlon's right about something, she's right about a lot of things, but I mean, you're about this particular thing, because you don't really cook in glassware in the same sort of a way that you can cook in Pyrex or in Corningware, right? So in that sense, Pyrex and Corningware are more like metal than they are like glass, even though in terms of porosity, they're more like glass than they are like metal, right? So it's really a question of, are you looking at what the substance of the material is, or are you looking in the way that it's used?
So putting it in dirt for it doesn't count.
Pardon me?
Putting it in dirt. When I was growing up, my mother, if she ever made a mistake or whatever, she would put whatever in the dirt first.
In the dirt, and yeah, I've heard that as well. No, it doesn't really count. I'm sorry.
Rabbi Alexander, who learned from Rabbi Dorff, used to teach us about Pyrex, that if you do cook in it and you can't remove the stains, that you have to treat it like metal. So you would have to put boiling water over it and then put it in a dishwasher if you wish. But if it's just regular Pyrex that doesn't have any stains or any residue behind, you can just put it in the dishwasher and it's fine, just like other glassware.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that was the thing that Marlon kept on saying, right? But the Pyrex gets stained, and so you've got to assume that there's a residue there and all of that, right? So I mean, so it's a question. So again, here the substance would lead you in one direction, and the use would lead you in the other direction. So clearly, if you're putting the Pyrex or the Corningware into the oven and cooking in it, then treat it like metal, right? And use boiling water to kosher it. Okay?
Okay, we have one question in the chat, and then I'm going to call on the three people who have their hands up. So Annette Berman asked, can tile counters which have grout be koshered by hot water?
Yeah, I mean, there are those who would say yes and those who would say no. What else is new? The issue is not the tile. The tile is probably is probably like marble or something on that order. The issue is the grout, and the question is how clean can you get that? And will the grout withstand the boiling water? Most of them will, right? And so if it can withstand, I mean, I think that's the sort of the rule of thumb. If it can withstand being cleaned with boiling water, then do it that way, and you've koshered your countertop. Okay. The one thing is though that if you're not sure, I don't want you to ruin your kitchen doing this stuff, right? So if you have any doubts as to whether if you pour boiling water over the grout, that the grout is just going to disintegrate, right? If that's what's going to happen, then don't do that, right? Use and even if you have any doubts about that, then you're better off covering your countertop and just working on the cover.
Okay. Right? Michelle, and then Rebecca, and then Frumi, and then Barry.
Hi, I was going to ask about the best way to kosher the refrigerator.
Oh, thank you. I forgot to mention that. So the best way to do that is to, you have to take everything out of it, right? And you clean it as thoroughly as you possibly can clean it. And because it is, and again, depending upon what it's made of and that kind of stuff, if you can put hot water, it doesn't have to be boiling, but if you can put hot water on the surfaces, that's probably best because that will really clean it more than you would ever clean it normally, right? If you can't do it, don't. Because remember, everything in the refrigerator is cold by definition, right? And so consequently, you're not presuming that it's getting into the metal in the same degree that if you're cooking in metal, right? So clean it out as thoroughly as you can, and then again, and again, if you can do it with hot water, it doesn't really have to be boiling. Boiling is 212 degrees, right? All it has to be is yad soledetbo. That is, it's hot enough so that if you stuck your finger in it, you would flinch, right? And that's roughly, I was told by some chemists that it's about 117 degrees, which is about a little bit more than half of what boiling would be, right? So if it can be just hot water that you use for cleaning your refrigerator, that's enough. And then dry it out and put the food back, right? That's all that you really have to do. Their freezer might be a little bit harder. It depends upon whether whether there's ice caked around it and all of that, in which case you're going to have to defrost it first and all of those things, right? But if you don't have a lot of frost in your freezer, then it's basically the same thing.
Rebecca.
Okay.
Yeah, you alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to ask about this notion of a found object where something hasn't been used for at least a year. So if you inherit something and you don't know how it was used, maybe it's even from an unkosher household, can you use it? Is serving platter, china, metal platter? What do you say?
Yes, and especially when this is especially if it's expensive like china and things like that. But even if it's not, if it hasn't been used for a year, then the presumption is that anything that got into it became tam livgam, as the halachic category. It became whatever was into it would taste terrible, right? So you would never want to use it as food, and so it then becomes nullified that way. But only if it's been for a year and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, if you find something, or even like during the year you find family china or something that comes to you and you have no idea how it was used, or maybe you do know exactly what it was used. It was used for trade food, right? You might know exactly the way it was used. Well, if you wash it and then don't use it for a year, then you can use, then it's parah. Then you can use it for anything you want.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Barry.
Hi. So, as a ceramist who works with glazed pottery,
There we go. Yes.
okay. So, glaze, by definition, these are metal oxides, which are mixed in water, so it looks like paint, but it's metal oxides. It's applied onto the earthenware, which is then taken to a very high temperature, so the metal oxides melt and coalesce. And so when bring it down to a normal temperature, it is metal. They're covered in metal. Looks like glass, but it's covered in metal. How do you treat this for koshering?
With difficulty. Okay. What I mean by that is this, that I think based upon the analysis that you just gave us, namely as to what exactly goes on in terms of some contemporary processes of ceramics, right? It is probably non-porous, I would imagine, and therefore should be treated at least as metal, maybe even as glass, right? Depending upon the degree to which it is non-porous. The problem is that first of all, the law was created at a time when earthenware was not covered in that way, right? And so there's a kind of suspicion about whether it can change in category even with these kinds of modern methods. But the other piece of it is, once you do it, could you use it in the oven?
Yes.
Okay. And could you pour boiling water over it?
Yes. If it's cold, you want to wait till it warms up before to put it on. But yes, you can put boiling water. You can put it into boiling water. Yes.
All right. Okay. So if you get something that Barry did, then you can use it as if it were metal. Okay. Because then you know exactly how the glaze was put on. Okay. The problem is that from one manufacturer to another, unless you really check it all out, right, you don't know what the covering is made of.
So my glazed pottery, I won't wash it like glass. I need to dip it in boiling water like metal.
Okay, right, because it has some porosity to it, is what you're saying.
No, I'm sorry. It's metal oxide. It's not not glass.
I understand.
So for koshering, am I treating it like metal, which you dip into boiling water, or am I treating it like glass where you wash it?
Well, it depends. You would need a chemical analysis of exactly how porous it is, right, in order for me to answer that question.
Okay.
But I mean, if you can, the more stringent position would be that you use boiling water. So if you can use boiling water on it, that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Frumi and then Henry. Oh, sorry, wait. I have to unmute you. There you go.
Hi, my question is just how to kosher the stovetop.
How to kosher again, please?
The stovetop.
Oh, the stovetops. Thank you. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention was that if you don't have a metal sink, if you have a what do you call it?
Ceramic?
A ceramic or
metal?
That white stuff that used no
Corian.
Porcelain?
Porcelain, that's it, porcelain, right. Right. If you have a porcelain sink, then what most people do is you clean it out as well as you can, but then you get bins, and you put the bins in the sink, and you wash the dishes and that kind of stuff for Passover in the bins, because porcelain is porous and you can't really kosher it. At least that's what I was taught. It's so if that's, if you have porcelain sinks, then that's what you should do. In terms of stovetops, there is basically it works out in the same sort of a way, namely that you clean the stovetops as well as you possibly can, maybe with steel wool. Right, and then you put them on. Then you put them back on the oven, and you put you light the various burners on it, and you let that go for well, maybe whatever, an hour at most. In other words, how long would you normally, what would be the longest that you would keep one of those burners on?
A long time.
How long would that be?
I don't know, but Ethan Tucker this morning in a video he made about stovetop said you can leave them on for 5 minutes. So let's go with 5 minutes.
Let's go with 5 minutes. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So you leave them on. The basic idea is you leave them on until they get really hot, right? And then and then let them cool off, and then you wash them one more time just to be safe, and then again, don't use them for 24 hours. Okay.
So do you not have to line them in any way, like put any kind of liner on the stovetop?
Well, again, I have seen that done.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and if that's your family's custom, then do that. Some people will put like aluminum foil, not on the stovetop. It's not on the metal part itself, but on the part that's around the burner, right? Again, just because there might have been food that splashed along, that splashed around it. So I've seen people do that. I'm not completely sure it's necessary. If you really wash it again with detergent, you wash it very carefully, and you and again let it sit for 24 hours without using it. I think that's enough.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Sorry.
So just a couple of quick comments and then another question. When you started out, you said, so do whatever your family tradition is. I don't think that's going to work because my family tradition was very lax on this.
I see. Okay. Well, not. Okay. Then you will,
So I have to at least come up to your minimum standards, Rabbi.
All right. Well, you know what you're reminding me of, Harry. I'll take your point in just a minute. But I say to rabbinical students that, the question is, do you wear tefillin during Chol Moed or not? So I say, there are different customs. And if your family does one, you should follow whatever your family custom was. So one of my rabbinical students said, well, my father did not put on tefillin during Chol Moed. Of course, he didn't put on tefillin during the rest of the year either, right? So now what do I do? Right. Go ahead. Yes.
So that's the same thing. So like I have to make my own customs up.
Okay.
So the other thing I was going to comment was back to Barry's concern. I've been drinking out of a mug that I never use for Passover, but the reason that I don't use it for Passover is it's nicely glazed, but it's not completely glazed. There's a little patch that's exposed, and the bottom is totally exposed.
Nice.
I don't know if everything is always completely covered in glaze or not, and that's part of the issue too, right? So anywhere it's clearly exposed, or where you obviously can't use it.
That's correct. Yeah, where there's any exposure beyond the glaze, then clearly it cannot be kosher.
Okay.
Right.
And then I think the last thing I was going to comment is that I think that the boiling water on grout, as long as you've done a reasonably good job of cleaning the grout to the best you can, most grout, unless it has cracks in it, can certainly take the boiling water just as well as the tile can.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Good.
Avi.
Hey, Rabbi Dorff. So I do have to point out one thing, that in the RA guide for Pesach, it does say that between the burners should be covered if possible. It's a very strong should statement, so I just had to put that out there for fun. My actual question, though, is things that you use tangentially to the meal, like the kosher netilat yadayim, my machronim, things like that. We have some nice ones that are not well glazed. They're kind of porous ceramic style. Would those be able to be used for Pesach, considering it's only cold and it's not actually directly used my machronim is used at the table, but the netilat yadayim is not used at the table to use separately, but with handling bread involved.
I mean, the question is, may you, given the fact that it's only used for cold water during the entire year, right? That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yeah. We don't. I mean, because usually it's during. We don't eat bread most of the time because we try to avoid all the rigmarole.
Probably yes, but I would tell you that along the lines that I was talking about before with the glass dishes that my roommates and I used that one year, I think it's not just even just simply using a glass on Passover, different something. It's basically to make a difference between Passover and the rest of the year. I mean, the ultimate answer is, since it's only used for cold water, yes. Okay, but that said, there's also the symbolic piece of this, right? There's the halakhic piece of this, and then there's the symbolic piece of this. And if you can use anything else for it, just to indicate that this is a different time of year, that's probably preferable.
I'm always happy to look for an excuse to go shopping for more Judaica, so don't worry.
Okay, you can.
That's how you know you're a rabbinical student.
That's right.
Okay. Rachel has a question, and then Gary.
Yes, thank you very much. Rabbi, I know that coffee, the halacha of coffee, but I have an espresso maker that I absolutely am nuts about and must have on certain days, when that is the only thing that's used. And I know that the coffee is, kosher and it's not flavored. It's regular.
It's just regular coffee.
Can I use it? Is one my bottom line question.
Yeah, if you have used it only for pure coffee, in other words, not flavored coffee,
correct,
right, throughout the entire year, then sure, then you don't have to do anything. You just use it.
Thank you so much.
I mean, you might clean it the way that you would clean it after using it, right? I mean, but it's...
Yes. There's also a process of where you clean the whole machine out, which includes everything, the water and all of the machine. And so I would do that and then use it.
Good. No, that makes sense. Because basically, you're cleaning it as thoroughly as it can be cleaned, is basically what you're telling me.
Yes, indeed.
Right. Good. Okay. That's fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Gary.
I have a question about the Seder plate. In the old days, we were carnivorous all the time and meat everything. But now we are not carnivorous. We're going to have the second Seder, or second Seder, we're going to have fish. And we were planning to use our milchig plates. And when I'm talking about the Seder plate, do we put the stank bone on it? What do we use in lieu of the bone?
I just read this recently, actually. You can use a beet.
A beet?
Yes.
Yeah. Vicious.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, by the way, there's an increasing number of vegetarians, and so the kinds of questions that you're asking is being asked many, many times more than it was 20 years ago.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of the new customs have arisen, to be a kind of symbolic of what it was, but not the actual thing, because you're not, because you're not eating meat. So it's, but it sort of looks like what the shank bone used to look like, and it's good enough, because I mean, even the shank bone itself is symbolic, right? It's symbolic of the entire animal,
right?
Right. So you're just substituting a non-meat symbol for a meat symbol.
Just one additional question on the Seder plate. We got for our wedding, we got lots of a couple Seder plates, but we also have some from our grandparents or parents. We have no idea what they used on that stuff.
Right.
And it's that type of thing you can't kosher. You said you wait a year, it's cool.
Yeah. If you wait a year, it's cool. Yes. Especially because whatever was on the Seder plate was cold to begin with. Right. So especially if you're even if it's out of earthenware, if you wait a year, it's fine.
Okay. Good. Make my wife happy. Thank you.
Good. Sure.
Diane and Larry.
I think it's mainly me. So first of all, in our house, Diane rules. So I have no say.
Rabbi, I know that story.
The story you tell about Marlon, when we first moved to Israel and we got invited to Rabbi Golinkin's house for a Seder, and at that time his wife, he had just written the tshuva about kitniot for Jews in Israel, but not in his house because his wife at the time wouldn't allow him at all.
It seems to be a common phenomenon. Okay.
But when we moved to Israel, and Diane was following, I think it was Rabbinical Assembly guidelines, and checking everything. Did the knives have joints? Did this, what you could do? And of course, chas v'chalila, you would try to kosher anything wooden. And then we went to the local cauldron that is on every corner, not every corner, but near the synagogues for koshering. And people brought all manners of things. Absolutely. And nobody questioned anything.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Wooden, plastics.
Yeah, it was the neighborhood Orthodox shul that was running it. And things that I wouldn't have dreamed of koshering, no problem. They went into the boiling water, they went out, and that was it.
And finally, this morning, Rabbi Avi Chavivi talked about an article from Rabbi Chaim Ovadia, who is extraordinarily lenient in all matters.
Right.
I'm not asking you whether you approve or don't approve, but if you just Google it, you can find it. Or if you want the article, I'll be happy to send it to anybody. Or even
send it to me. I'm interested in seeing what you're right. Yes.
I'm going to how to clean in half a day.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not.
That's not that one.
Well, I will put in the chat the one that I have.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Again, there are. I mean, as I said from the very beginning, there are multiple ways of making Pesach and multiple customs along this line. Passover, I think, more than any other holiday that we have, has generated a lot of customs that are unique to particular communities, for that matter, unique to particular families, right? And that's all good. I mean, that enriches our tradition. But it also, customs also affect law. And so the way that you're supposed to make Passover, right? Everybody understands that that's going to be different from the rest of the year. How different from the rest of the year, and how do you make it different? There are variations, as you're hearing. And it's, so, I mean, that's why I said to you at the very beginning, if you're invited to somebody else's home, this is, I guess, post-COVID, right? If you're invited to somebody else's home and you know that they understand what it means to keep kosher and to keep Passover, and they do it, just and accept the invitation and don't ask questions, right? Because the way they do it will probably be somewhat different than the way you do it, and it doesn't matter.
I did not mean to cut you off, but we have a question about microwaves and how you kosher a microwave.
Oh, you kosher a microwave the same for Passover the same way you do during the rest of the year. In other words, if something got into a microwave and and you need to kosher it for some reason, you take like a coffee cup or something like that can be, that can have boiling water in it, and you put water in it and you boil it, and in other words, you bring it to a boil so that the steam goes out. Well, first of all, you first of all clean out the microwave, right? And then you put a cup in it and you boil water in it, so that the steam gets through gets into the into the metal of the microwave, and then let it cool down and wash it out one more time, and it's done. And again, if you're going from regular use to Passover use, don't use it for 24 hours.
Which is really good this year because we have Shabbos in between, so it's very easy to not use any of these things for 24 hours.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Any final questions? Oh, Jennifer has a question. She's waving her hand.
How are we managing Shabbat? How are we managing this? I'm coming to your house, or?
Rabbi Klickfeld just said, Rabbi Dorff is more than welcome to answer this question.
No. I was going to say the same thing you were about to say.
Rabbi Klickfeld just sent out an extensive email on this. There's
I'll look at that.
Yeah, you can look at that. There are very easy, quick answers that he gives as well, like using paper and plastic, eating outside, not having challah, and using egg matzah. There are some things that are just very easy to do, and other things that go into more detail.
Got it.
I
ask one more question? Oh.
I think that our article that you should definitely read it. It was excellent in terms of describing, and also there's been some suggestions in terms of Balbusta doing the that Friday night meal. So there's been some suggestions, and I think that you might want to look at that.
Yeah, I just haven't had a chance to look at it. Can I ask one?
I wanted to ask. Oh, sorry. I wanted to ask Rabbi Dorff if from Shabbos, once you finish Havdalah and you go into Seder, do you in your practice and with me, I've always been raised where you transfer the light. You have one of those big candles.
Yeah.
It's still Shabbos, and then you've done Havdalah, so you can, I'm assuming you can cook, or at least in our house. But because the stovetop is on manual, it's the transferring of light from the candle to the stovetop. What is your interpretation?
Well, first of all, I mean, it is the case. I thank you for mentioning it. It is the case that because we have this 3-day Yontif thing, right, Shabbos and then 2 days of Yontif, it would be very wise to get one of these long-lasting candles for as many as 3 days. They have them, and because then what's going to happen is that on Saturday night you don't make the regular Havdalah. Havdalah is part of Kiddush on Saturday night, and so you say Kiddush, and then and you'll see it in the liturgy in the Haggadah. You'll see it, and it's that point, and of course you don't blow it off. You don't blow it out, right? Because on Yontif you're allowed to transfer fire, but you're not allowed to extinguish fire. So and that 3-day candle will also be used for lighting the candle for the second day of Yontif. Now, in terms of you have a gas stove top, is that what you're saying,
Rachel?
Yes.
I see. So, and do you have what do they call it?
Pilot light.
A pilot light. Thank you. A pilot light.
What it is that you just turn on and put the candle or the next to it, and it just lights up when it's on manual.
So that's
okay. So you could, I mean, depending upon what's the easiest thing to do. I mean, you could use the 3-day candle itself, or you could take a Hanukkah candle and transfer it from the 3-day candle to light the pilot light, and then just let the Hanukkah candle blow out. I mean, put it in the sink or something and let it just extinguish itself.
What do you do with the stove? Do you just keep it on really low, almost like a blech, or do you? And if you have a gas stove, then that's probably what you'd have to do. Yeah. Although, if you have a gas stove, then that's probably what you have to do.
So Jennifer had a follow-up question, and then Diane has something to say.
So I have started doing this over the past few years, and I don't know if it's because I read it or heard it, but because it's just Dan and me, we kosher a certain amount of things. We clean out many of the cabinets, but then we tape the cabinets, and most of what we do happens on this one counter. If we had kids around and things like that, it'd be a different thing. That's really okay, right?
Yeah. Because, see, the answer is yes. And see, because the reason is this. There are 3 laws in regard to this. One is you're not allowed to eat chametz. Second is it may not be found within your home. That's why you sell it, right? So that it's even though, and then bal yera'ah, and you may not be seen. So what people very often do is you sell your chametz and you have it all in whatever cabinet it is, and you put Scotch tape or something across the cabinet so that just to remind you not to open it. And so you're not seeing the chametz because it's in the cabinet somewhere, right? Or if you need to, depending on what's going on, if you need to put it on the floor somewhere in the den or something, or in a study that you're not going to use. If you don't have enough cabinet space, is what I'm saying, right? So cover it so that people you don't see it. right? Because that's the third thing. And then, yes, then the rest of it is, is out of sight, out of mind, basically.
Yeah, Diane.
So this is a solution for gas stoves that I learned from Hannah Golinkin, who was David Golinkin's wife, is no longer, but was. Right. And this is what she taught me to do. You take a match, you put the match to the stove, and simultaneous with lighting the match, you shut the burner, and you've actually transferred the fire from the burner to the match, and then you put the match down someplace and let it burn out.
Yeah, that's the same sort of thing I was saying with the Hanukkah candle. If you have a long enough match, that will do it, right? If you have a short match, you're going to burn your fingers. But but if you get one of these long stem matches, yeah, that's probably even better than a Hanukkah candle.
Right.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we've had an electric stove.
I think the point that Diane was making. The point Diane was making was that's a way to be able to turn off the gas burner, not just to be able to start it. Because you're now transferring it from the burner to the match, and then the match can be set aside to go out on its own.
That's right. That way you don't have to leave a gas flame burning, which seems to me to be very unsafe.
I see. I didn't know that. Okay, thank you. I mean, as I said, as I was just saying, we've had an electric stove for decades now. So the last time we had a gas stove was when we were in New York. So that was 50 years ago. So I'm afraid. I forgot that. Yes. So follow what Diane just said.
But she didn't get in New York, so what did she know?
Okay.
So Rebecca has one final question, and then we will wrap.
Jennifer's comment about, using part of her kitchen just kind of reminded me. I thought I would ask for a college student who shares an apartment with non-Jews. The student's gonna, she'll sell her chametz. She's gonna, do her things with her one or two shelves in the fridge and the microwave. But obviously the roommates will, be around doing their thing. Is there any, words of wisdom of what she should focus on if any of what they're doing or she sees in the fridge, she's, it's not hers, but how do you handle that situation?
I mean, I can tell you what you should not do. Don't start yelling and screaming at them. Okay. Right. And don't make it look as if, don't have her try to make, duties on her roommates that really are not at all reasonable for them. Right. So, I mean, have her do whatever seems to be the best that she can do to make Passover in her apartment, right? So I mean, she should probably explain to her roommates what's going on and why she's doing it differently now than she did during the other part of the year, right? She probably should explain that. But other than that, I mean, whatever seems to be possible, I think is really the issue. I had a Catholic roommate my second year of college, and my mother had made hamantaschen for Passover, and she sent us the hamantaschen, and Bob couldn't eat them because he had given up sweets for Lent.
Sure.
Then, about a month later, his mother sent cookies that she had made for Easter, right? But it was Chol Hamoed Pesach. So, right. I mean, that's how you learn about other people's traditions, and it's really fine. I mean, that's the just have her explain, that Passover is coming and there are all these kinds of special rules for it, and I'm not expecting you to know all of them. I just understand that I'm going to be doing some things somewhat differently over the next week or 9 days than I do normally. That's all.
When I was in college just a few years ago, one of the things that I would do with my roommates was I would cover the pantry in paper. So like if there's a piece of paper here, you could lift it up with a flap almost, like it wasn't taped down all the way, but that way the Passover stuff was visible and usable to me. and my roommate, who actually happened to be Jewish, but who wasn't keeping Passover, it was still easy for her to get to her stuff, but it wasn't in my way of Pesach. And then in terms of like utensils and pots and pans and those kinds of things, I had one pot, one pan, and I used paper and plastic at that point. Now you could use like compostable utensils and those kinds of things, but stuff you can throw away, so she doesn't have to worry about that. But if that's helpful, I'm also happy to talk to her if she wants to talk it through, or she can talk to Rabbi Pernick and we can have him help her.
Good.
Okay. Well, you all know Rabbi Dorff, so if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask him.
I'm not going anywhere.
Or feel free to ask me, but he's the person I would go to if I had a question. And thank you for being here, Rabbi Dorff. I know it's you've done this multiple times just today, so I appreciate you doing it for all of us. And hope to see.
And you will get. Rabbi Schatz is going to send you the link, or I guess
I did already.
You did already. So
in the chat,
you can see what the guide to Pesach is that the Rabbinical Assembly has put out. So for some of the specifics, you can see there.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, everyone. Laila Tov. Hope to see you soon. And
thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So great.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.